Germany's vaccine committee says AstraZeneca's coronavirus vaccine should only be given to people aged under 65. The committee has cited insufficient data for the effectiveness of the shot in those over that age. Australia has ordered nearly 54 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, with the rollout set to begin next month. Dr. Norman Swan is the host of the CoronaCast podcast and RN's Health Report, and he joins us now. Dr. Swan, welcome. What do you make of this German announcement about AstraZeneca?
Well, the Germans have been running this week, particularly in the tabloids, saying it's only 8% effective in older people. Part of the problem here is that the Astra trial has been a bit of a dog's breakfast. It'll all come good in the end, but they've changed the rules as they've gone through because they've been doing this kind of rolling trial. So first of all, they did a trial in Britain in the under 55s. That's the one where they thought they were getting a concentrated vaccine, which wasn't, and they ended up giving half a dose to people and then the full dose, and they actually got a good result from that, 90%, but it wasn't intended from the trial. Then they had another group of people who were testing whether the vaccine would work with a single dose, and they didn't get a good enough antibody response. So 2 to 3 months later, they gave them a second dose, when in fact the original intent was to give people second doses within 3 or 4 weeks. Then they recruited in their other trials, under-recruited elderly people in their other trials. So they're kind of late to the party with older people in their trials, and so they don't have a lot of data. What they do have is data that when you give the vaccine to older people in a laboratory setting, they do get a good antibody response. So there's no reason to expect that it won't work. But they're late in delivering the data about older people. So it's not that it's dangerous. The question is, does it work fully? And the likelihood that it is, and I think the likelihood is that when we approve it here, it will be approved for older people. And it's likely it will be approved for that in Europe as well. The question is what Germany will do.
Yeah. Well, and we'll get to more of a discussion about the actual vaccine in a moment, but I'm just struck by your description of it, and it sounds like it's warranted, of this as a bit of a dog's breakfast, this process. How could such an important vaccine be rolled out or tested in such an ad hoc way?
So, well, I think it's unfair. If I give the sense that it's ad hoc, it's pretty unfair. They're doing this at speed.
Yeah.
So normally you'd have a phase 1 trial, you have a phase 2 trial which checks out dosage, then you have a phase 3 trial which works out whether it works and whether it's safe in large numbers of people. What all the trials have been deficient on is the dosage side. They've compressed the dosage testing. And I suspect in a year or so's time, the dosage will all sort themselves out. That happened with the HPV vaccine, by the way. We thought we needed a certain number of doses, and it turns out we probably need fewer and fewer doses of the HPV vaccine. So anyway, so they were trying to get this done as quickly as possible, and they started trials and then changed them as they went according to circumstance. So they wanted to get it out there. They started the trial in the under 55s. When they knew they needed to recruit a lot of older people to get approval in the United States. They had a delay in the United States trial where they did have a recruitment of older people. So now, as they've all caught up, it's not that they've been badly conducted, it's just that they've had a catch-up. Right. And there are new data coming through now, which I'm told the TGA has, which weren't published in December.
And Australia will rely heavily on this, 54 million doses, I think, of AstraZeneca here in Australia. And as you say, you expect this will be administered to over 65s in Australia.
Yeah, I see no reason not to, unless there's a real surprise from the trial. Because even in the few people that they did test it on, it did seem to work. But it's just not, at the moment, statistically significant. But there are other data from another trial which are coming through the system, which I'm told, the 7:30 report the other night, TGA made it clear to us that those data are available to them.
And so do you find the German decision curious or not?
Well, it's not a decision yet. It's advice by an advisory committee to the regulator.
Right.
And so it remains to be seen whether they'll listen to that or not. And it depends on whether they look at the more recent data that haven't been published but are available. Yep. And remember, the Pfizer vaccine was approved on unpublished data as well.
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of concentration in Australia on Pfizer and AstraZeneca. What's happening with Novavax, which is also a vaccine that Australia has signed up for?
Yep. So this is a vaccine. This is unlike the other two vaccines. So what Pfizer and Astra do is they take genetic material into the cell and tells the cell to produce the spike protein. What the
Messenger RNA.
That's right, messenger RNA or a chimpanzee virus in case of the Astra vaccine. What the Novavax vaccine does is it injects the spike protein directly with a novel immune stimulant. They've got a special technology to stimulate the immune system along with it. They, in the last few hours, have just released their phase 3 results and showing a high degree of effectiveness, about 90% effective, except in their trial in South Africa, where they're down at about 60%. And this, they think, is a sign that the vaccine is less effective with the new variant that's taking over in South Africa. So it's still effective.
But 60% is still pretty good.
It's still pretty good,
yeah.
But it just shows that there's probably a bit of work to be done over the next few months to tweak the vaccines to make them more effective against some of these variants.
But things are looking really good at the moment in terms of the vaccine rollout around the world and the possibilities of getting on top of this in the next 12 months to 2 years.
Things are looking good in terms of vaccines. I think there's only one vaccine so far that's fallen over. I think that's the Merck vaccine. So the other ones are succeeding when normally there's a 90% failure rate. The problem now is supply, where the world is now madly scrambling for supply, particularly in countries that are desperate for it. And that will inevitably mean delays in Australia. We just don't know when all the Pfizer vaccine doses will be delivered. It's going to be done progressively, and they won't commit to what will arrive when. That will almost certainly be slowed down. We'll probably miss out on some of the overseas doses of Astra that are coming in, and we'll rely very heavily on our local production.
Yeah. And so taking into account where we were 12 months ago and saying that a vaccine...
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's truly amazing. Yeah. And the problem we've got is one of logistics and getting vaccines out there. But in some ways, if we can get vaccine to the poor countries, they know how to immunize large numbers of people very quickly. When there's rabies outbreaks and others, they can immunize millions in a couple of weeks. So they know how to do it. They've got paradoxically, they've probably got some better infrastructure than some other countries, particularly the United States, have to mass vaccinate.
So the world has been swamped by challenges with this pandemic over the past 12 months or so. Do you think we'll be sitting here in 2022, in January of 2022, and this will largely be behind us?
I'm not entirely confident. It depends on the variants. It depends. So if the problem now with supply is that it's slow by international standards. A country like Israel is pretty good. Britain's doing quite well. America's not yet doing well. If you do it slowly, the virus has got a chance to mutate around the vaccine. So for us to be in good shape in 2022, the vaccine's got to reduce transmission, probably will, and a very large proportion of the population of the world is immunized. If not, we're still hunkered down for a while.
Yeah. And you think we could well need vaccination shots for this annually or something like that? Because that's still not determined how long it's effective for?
Yeah, we don't know. It'll probably be determined more by the variants, the mutations, than how long the antibodies, well, it's both, how long the antibodies last. So the immunity lasts. So we just don't know the answer to those questions yet. But once a large proportion of Australians are immunised, we can relax a bit, because even if it comes into the country, it should be no more than the common cold. Yeah. But it means that 95 or 100% of Australians get immunised, particularly if it's the Astra vaccine.
Yeah. And what about international travel?
Well, you could, in theory, open the borders. If you've got the vast majority of Australians, remember, fewer than 1% of Australians have been immunised, and we had a terrible second wave in Victoria. So if we've still got 20% of Australians vulnerable, we could still have a very significant COVID outbreak here, even with immunisation, but not if their transmission is reduced. So if transmission is reduced, we should be in pretty good shape by the end of the year for international borders to open up.
Wow. And so, yeah, this has caused devastation around the world, but things are looking up for the moment.
You're pushing hard on the optimism here, Joe, and I commend you for it. And I would love nothing more than to stop doing CoronaCast tomorrow, because it's all over. And I do think, coming to be serious, that round about September, October, depending on how the vaccines have arrived in Australia, we will be in a position, and Australians are really good at getting immunised. I'll be lining up for whatever vaccine's available, that we will be in much better shape and able to make some decisions about opening borders. I do think that.
Okay, we'll leave there, Norman Swan.
You're welcome.